Blame it all on my roots. I showed up in boots. Ruined your black tie affair.
She was more like a beauty queen from a movie scene.
Great song. I know you like it too, but I got 15 things here for you that only Californians notice about Boise. Here we go. One of the most common questions that I'm asked by Californians who come to visit the Treasure Valley is, what is this chain that is hanging from the gutter of some homes? And no, the answer is not so that you can swing down from the roof to the ground. The chain is here in order to slow the water down as it comes from your gutter down to the ground. As it comes down the chain, it's not gonna come as quickly as if it drips from the gutter, so that's gonna prevent there from being holes and indentations from forming in the ground below. Now, it's also cheaper to just hang a chain, so it saves a little bit on building costs, and there's a bit of an aesthetic quality to it as well. Another thing that nearly every Californian notices about Boise is that nearly every home here in the valley has a crawl space rather than a slab-on-grade foundation. Now, there are two exceptions to that. Homes that have a basement are gonna have a slab foundation, and then also split entry homes. Those are the homes that have a level that is half underground where the window is at the ground level. Those are also gonna have slab on grade foundations. But outside of those two exceptions, 95, 96, 97% of homes here in the valley are going to have crawl spaces. Now, there are some advantages and disadvantages to having a crawl space. Probably the greatest advantage is that you have easy access to your plumbing and your ductwork. If you have an issue with your plumbing, it's very easy to get under the house and correct the issue. When I was remodeling both of my bathrooms, I actually wanted to move the furnace vent from one part of the bathroom to the other. It's very easy for me to get underneath and move it. If you have a slab on grade foundation, that basically is impossible. You have to cut through the concrete, dig up the piping, and then re-pour the concrete when you're done. And another advantage to having a crawl space is a slab can be more susceptible to damage from frost and ice. Now, there are a couple disadvantages to having a crawl space. Number one, if you have a big open space underneath your flooring, you are simply providing more opportunities for there to be mold growth and microbial growth underneath your house. So you have to keep an eye on that. You also are providing a very nice place for rodents and insects to live. So you do want to keep an eye to make sure that you're not having some little creatures crawling around under your floor. So you want to keep an eye on that. And finally, a crawl space can be a little bit louder to walk on as well. Can hear that? It sounds a little bit hollow, so it can be a little bit louder than a slab on grade foundation. But again, in the Treasure Valley, more than 95% of homes have a crawl space rather than a slab on grade foundation. 3, Californians notice that Idaho actually teaches real US history. If you're from California, you may think that all history curriculums in schools across the United States are rewriting history, like Project 1619, for example, which teaches that the US was founded not in 1776, but in 1619 with the main goal of enslaving black people. We don't teach that here in Idaho. We just released our curriculum last year called The Story of America. And from what I can gather, it seems that the curriculum really tries hard to be honest with the injustices that we have seen here in America, while also highlighting the great achievements and contributions of the United States. Written by Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Education, and from what I can gather, he seems to be somebody with his head on his shoulders. Californians are also surprised to hear that you have to blow out your sprinkler lines before the winter. Now, it does get cold here in the Treasure Valley, so if you don't blow out the water out of your sprinkler lines, when they freeze, the ice will burst your sprinkler system, and then you'll have to repair your pipes in the spring. So what you do is you get a guy that comes out with a large air compressor, usually pulls it behind his car, it's really large, and he'll attach it to your sprinkler system and blow high pressured air into your sprinkler lines, and that air will push out the water out of your sprinklers so that there's no longer any water in your sprinkler system. Now, it costs anywhere between $40 to $80 depending on how many sprinkler zones you have. And just as a power tip, you may want to start thinking about scheduling the sprinkler blowout, because everybody in the valley has to blow out their sprinklers. Think about when you want to schedule that sprinkler blowout sometime in the end of August, early September, because if you wait till the last minute to schedule it, those sprinkler blowout people get very busy here in the valley. You may have trouble finding somebody who will be available. Another thing that people will notice who's coming from California to Idaho is, and I heard actually from somebody who was visiting Idaho, is they were walking literally down this street and they looked on the sidewalk and they said, whoa, they actually put clothes on the side of the street like this. If this was in California, they would have been ripped off within 5 minutes. And similarly, my California friends tell me that it is very noticeable that everything in Walmart and other stores is not all locked up behind glass panels like they are in California stores because of all of the stealing sprees that have swept through the Golden State. Now, I'm not trying to say that there's no crime here in Idaho. There's theft, but it doesn't seem to be at the same level that it is in California based on what I hear, especially since California has passed these laws that say that they're not going to prosecute criminals who steal items that are $1,000 or less in value. Another thing that Californians notice about the Treasure Valley is that new homes here do not have to have solar panels on them on the roofs. California passed a law in 2020 that said that all new homes have to have solar panels on them. Not the case here in Idaho. You can see behind me here is a whole row of new homes, and in fact, none of these have solar panels on them. Solar is not really a big thing here in the Treasure Valley. A couple years ago, they were trying to make a push for solar power. I'd have people coming to my house and trying to sell me solar panels, but I've never really felt a big need for solar panels here. I went back and looked at my electric bill over the past year, and on average, I pay $74.66 per month for electricity. So I've never really felt a big need for solar electricity. Another thing that Californians will notice about Boise is that if you happen to run into the store and forget to lock your car like I just did, don't tell anyone, pick up a bottle of milk, you actually can come back out to your car. It's still there if you forget to lock your door. So before I get to the next one, I'll mention that I wrote a guide for visiting the city of Boise, what to see, what to do, tons of info about the city. It's a free download, and the link for where to get that is in the description below. And if you don't want the guide, just tap the like button. Pretty much any roof that you find here in the Treasure Valley is going to be built out of asphalt shingles and not ceramic tiles, so that's definitely a difference that Californians will notice when they come to the Treasure Valley. Now, asphalt shingle roofs are usually rated for 30 years, but usually after 20 to 25 years, you should plan on having to replace it. My roof here is 23 years old, and as you can see, a lot of the granules have already begun to fall off. So I'm gonna have to replace it probably in the next year or two, and I'm planning on having to spend about $12,000 to replace the roof. Ceramic roofs look very nice, and they also have a longer rating. They can go for 100 years. The disadvantage to ceramic roofs, though, is that they are brittle when you step on them. So if you are up on your roof, you have the danger of damaging it. And they're also heavier than asphalt shingles. So that has to be accounted for in the building, and that's going to add to the building costs of the house itself. In the Treasure Valley, though, pretty much any roof that you're going to find is going to be a 30-year asphalt shingle roof. Another thing that Californians notice about Idaho is that people here are friendly. Now, I like to go on walks around my neighborhood, and pretty much anybody that I see in my neighborhood is gonna say hi to me, whether I know them or not. Another thing that's really noticeable about the Treasure Valley is that you can walk under a bridge and not worry about getting mugged. Now, I'm not trying to just rag on the state of California, but I've been there several times over the past several years, and I've noticed a huge increase in the homeless population. Here in the Treasure Valley, we're really blessed. I'm not gonna say that we have no homeless, but we really have very few. And it's not like California where under every overpass and bridge or public place, there's homeless people sleeping everywhere. Here I walk around the city, and honestly, I hardly ever think about my safety. Californians also notice that our state is very pro-life. Now, some of you know this is an issue that I'm very passionate about, in part because of the birth of my daughter and the whole story connected to that. But our state has some of the most pro-life policies in the country. We have policies that protect unborn children really from conception, and it's thanks to these recently passed laws that you can't just walk into a clinic and kill your unborn baby once that baby has a heartbeat. In fact, our state is so pro-life that last year, the federal government, the Biden administration, sued the state of Idaho, presumably because we were protecting too many unborn babies. California, on the other hand, is one of the most pro-abortion states in the country. And sadly, I wouldn't want to be an unborn child in that state. Another thing Californians always notice is that most of the siding here is made out of wood and not stucco. Now, there's really 4 main types of siding that you'll find here in the valley: wood, cement board, vinyl, and stucco. Most of the homes that you'll see have wood siding, like what you have here behind me. Now, this wood siding is usually chemical pressure treated to prevent insects and rot, and then it's painted. You don't see very much untreated cedar siding like you see in New England or other parts of the country. So usually it's gonna be treated and painted like this, and when it's properly cared for, it usually has a rating of around 40 years. A lot of the new homes that they're building, they're putting cement board siding on it. Those are just small strips of cement board, actually, that has to be cut with a special blade, so it's a bit more difficult to install. Also, it's going to be painted, but when it is properly cared for, it usually has a rating of between 50 to 60 years. Vinyl siding you'll see in homes that were built in the late 90s, early 2000s, and in starter homes. Now, it has the disadvantage of being a little bit less aesthetically pleasing, but it has the advantage of the fact that it's basically made out of plastic, so it's very durable. When it's properly cared for, it usually has a rating of between 30 to 40 years. And then finally, stucco, we're beginning to see more and more here in the valley, particularly in new homes that are being built. It usually has a rating of between 50 to 60 years. It expands and contracts with the weather, so it's very resistant to rot, mold, and mildew. 13, Californians notice that you can wear a Trump hat here and not worry about getting shot. Now, the state of Idaho is going to go to Trump or Nikki Haley. She's a nominee. Not really looking like that's going to be the case, but that's something that Californians notice. You can wear a Trump hat here and not worry about getting shot. Now, interestingly, even though Donald Trump has actually never been to Idaho, DJT took 63.8% of the votes last time around, which was almost double what Joe Biden took. He took 33.1%. And because the state of Idaho has gone Republican consistently for the past many, many election cycles, going all the way back to the 1970s, they call Idaho a deep red state, which is quite different than the state of California. 14, Californians noticed that the Second Amendment applies to everybody here in Idaho. I remember last year there was a tragic shooting in New Mexico, but the governor of New Mexico responded by issuing an executive order that forbid everybody, including law-abiding citizens, from carrying a weapon throughout the entire county. Now, I thought that was a bit of a violation of the Second Amendment. I don't think it would have gone over very well here in Idaho. In Idaho, everybody over the age of 18 can carry a concealed weapon. You don't need a special permit for that. Idahoans love the Second Amendment, and Californians notice that when they come here. Finally, and for this one I had to adjust the camera angle just slightly so you could see my deer that I just shot this past year. Californians noticed that the state of Idaho really encourages its residents to get out, hunt, fish, and enjoy the Idaho outdoors. And they really try to encourage even the youngest Idaho residents. You can start hunting at the age of 10 here in the state, which is pretty young. And you don't even need a license that first year. You just hunt on your parents' license. You don't have to complete hunter's education. You don't need a fishing license until you're 15 years old. And really, they try and minimize the rules and the regulations so you can just get out and enjoy the nature. From what I'm told, that's not the same feeling that Californians have about their state. They feel like there's a lot more rules and regulations about what they can and can't do in the wilderness of their state. Hey, thanks for watching. If you didn't catch my latest video on all the significant things that happened last year here in Boise, you can check it out right here.